We are live.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We'll get started with Planning Committee for February 15th. Before we begin the items on the agenda, we are going to do our annual election for chair and vice chair. So I will open the floor up for nominations for chair. Councillor Sicoli.
Yes, I'd like to nominate Mayor Kevin Davis to continue as chair, recognizing that we may need a vote to waive the rules to allow him to serve 2 consecutive terms.
Mayor Davis, do you accept the nomination?
Yes.
So Councillor Sicoli, would you be comfortable being the mover to that motion?
Yes, I would.
And your seconder?
Councillor McCreary.
The voting should be available on your screens now.
Are we on the 2/3?
Yes.
Yes.
Do we get to speak to this at all, or is this just automatic?
Oh, did you want to debate it?
Yeah, I just want to record that I won't be supporting the resolution on the floor. Thank you.
And Councillor Sless, I'm just waiting for your vote. I'm just waiting for your vote, Councillor Sless.
We didn't hear the on the 2/3.
Yes.
I
The mo-
didn't get I did not get a vote cap come up here.
Oh, I apologize, Councillor. What is your vote?
My vote is yes.
And the motion carries on a recorded vote of 5-1. Those voting in favor were Councillor Sicoli, Sless, McCreary, and Mayor Davis, and Councillor Van Tilburg, and those opposed were Councillor Carpenter. And then we will go to nominations for vice chair. Any nominations for vice chair?
Did we have to do the waive rules?
We waive the rules.
Vote on the mayor being chair? Yeah.
That was the motion to waive the rules, was the vote for chair.
Yes.
That was the vote.
Okay, that would be the vote.
So the motion is to have the mayor as the chair. Councillor Sicoli, you're moving, and Councillor McCreary, you are seconding. And any discussion? Seeing none, we'll go to the vote. That's correct. And Councillor Van Tilburg, I'm just seeing.
Yeah, my vote is yes. There's just I'm gonna log out of eScribe and come back in to see if the votes will come back.
And the motion carries on a vote of 5-1. Those voting in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillor Sicoli, Sless, McCreary, Van Tilburg. Those opposed, Councillor Carpenter. Okay, now we will go to the vote, to the motion for vice chair. Any nominations for vice chair? Councillor McCreary.
I would like to nominate Councillor Carpenter.
Councillor Carpenter, do you accept the nomination?
No, I do not.
Any other nominations for vice chair? Mayor Davis.
I'll nominate Councillor Sicoli.
Councillor Sicoli, do you accept the nomination?
Yes, I do.
Are there any other nominations for vice chair? Seeing no other nominations, you are acclaimed as vice chair. Mayor Davis, you have the roadmap. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. So I believe roll call has been taken.
Roll has been taken.
All right. Does any member of the committee have to declare a pecuniary interest regarding the, I think, 3 items we have on our agenda today? If so, please physically raise your hand. Seeing no declarations, does anybody want any of the items separated for discussion purposes? Obviously, the 5.1 is being separated because it's a statutory public hearing, but we have 2 other items. Does anybody want either of those 2 items separated? Okay, if I can get a mover and seconder then to place those 2 items on the floor. Moved by Councillor Sluss, seconded by Councillor
To look this way.
Secoli. All right. Right, Madam Clerk, please take the vote on the items that have not been separated.
Motion carries on a recorded vote of 6-0. Those voting in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillor Secoli, Sluss, McCreary, Carpenter, Van Tilburg.
All right, so we'll move into the statutory public hearing. We've got one item on today's public meeting. This meeting is being held in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act. The purpose of the hearing is to discuss the planning application and to hear from the public either in support of or against the application. At the end of the public meeting, the committee will then deal with a recommendation, which generally is then considered for a final decision at the next meeting of the council. The name of anyone who speaks in regards to any item will appear within the meeting minutes. Anyone wishing notice of any further proceedings regarding the application should also provide their name and address to the clerk's office. We ask that members of the public in attendance today to speak to any item, please ensure that you add your contact information to the sign-in sheet located at the delegates table or at the back of the room. And if you speak, you'll be asked for the same information, your name and your address. So the procedure we follow is that the applicant speaks first, followed by municipal staff, and then the public. Each have up to 10 minutes to speak, inclusive of questions from the committee. The applicant then has 5 minutes at the end to provide clarification to any questions or issues raised during the meeting. As a reminder, the following rules of decorum as set forth in the city's procedural bylaw apply. On the screen, you can see it there. No person shall display any sign, banner, placard in the meeting room other than materials that, in the opinion of the chair, are legitimate audiovisual aids necessary in connection with any presentation to be made to the committee. Secondly, all persons present shall use polite and respectful language and shall refrain from the use of any language or the making of any gesture that is disrespectful or offensive. Third rule, all persons addressing the committee shall speak only on the subject in debate and shall not speak in any other subject. And the fourth rule we have is no person shall applaud participants in debate or engage in conversation or behavior that may disrupt the proceedings of the meeting. So we'll now consider the one item that we have during the public hearing portion, and it is 5.1. It's an official plan amendment OPO 323 and zoning bylaw amendment PZO 723 and draft plan of subdivision 29T 23501, all of which is in respect to a property known municipally described as 282 Stanley Street here in the city of Brantford. So I'll now call upon the applicant or the agent for the applicant to come to the committee. If you please come forward, sir. Morning, sir. If you please state your name and address, and then you'll have 10 minutes inclusive questions from the committee.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of committee. My name is Martin Quarkapone with Weston Consulting. I'm here on behalf of the owners of 282 Stanley Street, here to present their proposal for the subject lands. I have prepared a presentation, and I understand I only have 10 minutes, so I'll do my best to get through the most important parts, as I know that staff do have their presentation to follow as well. I presume this is the clicker. There we go. So on screen here is an overview of the property. I'm going to assume that the majority of us in the room have a good understanding of the context of the land. So I think what I'll do with this one is just kind of highlight the portion of the lands that we're talking about here outlined in red, which, as we know, is the former Arrowdale Golf Course. This slide provides a bit of an outline as to how we got where we are. We had our initial meetings with city staff back in December of 2021. From that point, we made our first submission in July of 2022 and had our neighborhood meeting in June of last year. And comments and notes around that meeting are found in staff report. And I can speak to that if needed. I was at that meeting and did provide the public with a presentation. Subsequent to that, we made some formal submissions back to city staff, and we're now here at the end of the slide here in February 2024 with the statutory public meeting. So I'll go over the next couple slides fairly quickly because I do think staff are going to be giving a bit more detail on the policy side of things. But the subject lands are designated as open space and parks within the city's official plan. Obviously that does not permit residential uses. So the applicant is seeking to redesignate that from open space to residential area. And that designation will permit all of the proposed uses that I will walk through the proposal. Much like the zoning, which is consistent with the ineffective official plan policies, the lands are zoned OS1, which allows for public parks and again, golf course uses. And the applicant is seeking to rezone this property to various residential zones to allow for various residential building forms and types. This next slide here, I'll go through this quickly, but identifies the various components of the development. There are zones that represent the different types of built forms, including detached residential, townhouses, condominium townhouses, apartment built forms. And what you'll also see there in the northwest and the southwest and the northwest corners of the property, you see an OS zone. In the north area, in the northwest, you'll see OS1, which is a new parquet that's been added to the plan. And in the south west corner is OS3, which would be the stormwater management pond that is proposed to accommodate the development. I think what I'll do is skip over this slide. It's a bit wordy, and I think, but it does outline a lot of the facilities and community benefits that are within the proposed area of this development plan. I think what's missing from this slide is a bit of green just to the west of what we're showing here in the dotted red, which is the New Arrowdale Public Park. So in terms of the proposal, and when coming up with the development plan, we looked at this with different design objectives and goals. And what we have here are some of the themes that we looked at when trying to create this development plan. And you'll see that we have focused on walkability and pedestrian comfort, access to green areas and landscaping, and housing options. So this slide identifies the various pedestrian connections and routes that we looked to incorporate into the plan. That are identified with the arrows. What I would like to showcase quickly, because this is a new potential addition to this project. If you look to the eastern portion of that internal block that's highlighted in yellow, you'll see that it's identified as a potential school block. And this is something new that came to our attention fairly recently with the school board interested in looking at this site for a potential new school. Nothing has been formalized. This is just interest that's being explored. I'm not seeking to modify this proposal today by any means, but I wanted to highlight that if a school does come to the site, this would be the approximate location that it would take. And we'll work with city staff to facilitate that should it come forward. But at this time, it's just more of a question, and we're looking to see how that will be answered. In terms of access to green space and landscaping, we've highlighted the various components of those areas on this plan, and I'll go around the perimeter first and then come to the center. We've got the pedestrian connection in brown there along Stanley that will provide public access into the site. At the south end in green is a privately owned public space. This will be part of that future development of that apartment block. What that means will be it'll be privately owned by the condominium corporation, but would have full public access like a traditional park, but privately owned. Moving across, we've got that area in brown on the west, which would also add pedestrian connectivity to the existing planned park to the west. This would form part of the stormwater management block that would ultimately be owned by the city. And in the northwest corner, we've got that future parquet that I noted earlier. So this provides a good overview of the proposal. I will get into detail if I have enough time in terms of the details of all the elements of the plan. But we have a mix of apartment units, single detached, traditional townhouses, dual frontage, and condominium townhouse units, which I'll run through over the next few slides. So just quickly in terms of the evolution of the plan, what you see on the left is what was presented at the public meeting last June. There is an error on the slide that says June 2024. That should be June 2023. But there's been some changes to the plan since that time. And I want to highlight them very, very quickly. I mentioned the park in the northwest. On the left plan, you'll see there were units, detached units in that corner. We've removed 3 of them and put in a park, given some concerns with easements and grading. We've also modified the road network to make sure things were connected efficiently, and we didn't have redundancies in terms of transportation. And in terms of connectivity to the park, on the image on the left, you'll see 2 green connectors that were proposed that would go to the park from what we call Street A. But on the plan to the right, those were removed, given concerns with grading and safety. But we did maintain that connectivity through that future parkette, and I proposed connection through the future storm pond. So now I'll jump into the proposed build forms. These are images, precedent ideas that the development could look like. At this time, we have some sketches and ideas of what we think these will ultimately resemble, but these are just some examples of what we were thinking of when we came up with our designs. Again, what we are showing here are the submitted elevations of the detached units, the townhouses, and the mid-rise built forms. What you'll notice is they're all about the same size, but the singles are 2 stories, the townhouses are 3 stories, and on the far right there are 6 and 8 story mid-rise buildings. So they're not to scale, but I wanted to note that the differing stories and heights of these types of units. So going into the detached units, which are highlighted here, these are traditional detached homes that would front onto a public road. Again, these are 2-story. They do range from a mix of 30-meter depth to about 42. These were revised in depth to accommodate some grading issues that were initially proposed on the concept from last year. But instead of having some of that grading leak into the city's park, we increased the depth of these units on that west side to ensure that all post grading would be captured within the site. Moving to the dual frontage townhouses, these front onto Stanley, but also back onto a new future public road. They're dual frontage, meaning they'll have access from the front. They'll have their traditional front doors along Stanley with a walkway to the sidewalk, as well as access from the rear, which is where their garages will be from. These will again be 3 stories and have their amenity space on the deck, above the unit and above the garage. So these, although they will not have traditional backyards, but they will have private amenity space per unit. Moving into the traditional towns, these are what we think of when we think of townhouses. These will front onto Street A, have a traditional townhouse feel, and have their own private amenity space in the rear. And these will again be 3 stories. Moving to the interior of the property, this will be a future development block. What you're seeing here is conceptual in nature. We wanted to illustrate what this could look like. The draft plan subdivision, which I'll get to shortly, outlines this as one large block. But we wanted to illustrate and showcase what this could look like with a mix of traditional condominium townhouses that are shown in yellow, as well as stacked townhouse projects, as well, what's shown there in purple. These will be 3 stories. Moving into the mid-rise blocks that are along Elgin, I'll start on the far west, which is a 6-story mid-rise building that terraces away from the existing residential that's further to the west. The larger block that's at the corner of Stanley and Elgin is a mix of 1 6-story and 1 8-story residential apartment building with a mix of condominium townhouses as well. Like the internal condominium block, these are conceptual in nature. And what I'll add is once these blocks are created, there will be a future site plan application that will deal with the detailed design of those. So although I'm showing a configuration here that I think makes sense, the applicant, the developer, will have to come back to the city with another application to prevent their detailed design on those particular blocks. So on screen here is the plan of subdivision that's colored up to show the various phases of the project. I'll start in the blue, which is phase one. That represents all of the infrastructure required to support the project. So in the lower left corner of the larger block, that's the stormwater management pond. And then in blue around the perimeter is the future public streets. Moving to phase two, which would be all the yellow blocks. These are the freehold single detached units, as well as those townhouses, both the traditional and the dual frontage. Phase three will be that internal condominium townhouse block. I noted earlier that there's no set in stone design for that block. That will come later, but we do have some ideas of how that would work. And should that school block come forward, we will be able to revise the design to accommodate that. Accommodate should it be presented. Phase four, and sorry, before I get to phase four, I'll say that the package that was submitted to the city that's part of the notice included only 4 phases. What you're seeing here is a potential 5th. So phase 4 on the notice had the both apartment blocks along Elgin as one phase. With this plan, we're showing phase 5, which is the smaller 6-story on its own as a potential last phase. This is just to allow for some flexibility to, if we need additional time to bring additional units on stream. So if we can build all 3 at the same time between phases 4 and 5, that will occur. But should there need to be a bit of a delay between phases 4 and 5, this plan would allow for it. What I will note is that there's also some conditions in the draft approval that would allow for us to work with staff to finalize the phasing for this project. So overall, I missed this in my notes here, but overall, we're looking at a total of 764 units across the board here. That includes the conceptual townhouses in the center there as phase number 3, as well as the conceptual apartment
Mark, can you
buildings.
wrap it up for the next minute?
Last slide, sir. And that includes the conceptual units that are in phases 4 and 5. With that, I am all done. I think I was a bit over time. I apologize, but I'm here for questions from the committee as well as the public. Thank you.
Yeah, I've just gone slightly beyond the 10 minutes.
Sorry about that.
So thank you very much, Mark. And again, you'll have an opportunity at the end of the public hearing portion to respond to any issues that come up during the meeting. So now we'll go over to that portion of the meeting where we have staff provide their input. And I believe, Jeff, you're going to be doing that.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of Planning Committee. My name is Jeff Medeiros. I'm a senior planner with the City of Brantford, and I'm here this morning to present the subject applications. Those are Planning Act applications. There's statutory requirements to deal with how we notify the public and how we process them, and they're specific to a zoning amendment, an official plan amendment, and a draft plan of subdivision, which is a process used to do a few different things, but typically it's to subdivide land. In this particular case, it's proposed to create new roads, reserves, swim pond, park out, walkway blocks, and then ultimately residential development for a total of 764 units. So the subject lands are in fact 2 separate parcels, one being a larger property and then a much smaller one. They're adjacent to 3 public streets, Elgin and Stanley, both which are minor collector roads in the city's official plan, and Campbell Street, which is a collector road. The site has a number of existing easements, and that's to recognize servicing. Primarily, they're located along the northern and southerly limits of the subject lands. When looking at the neighborhood, it's very much what I'm going to call an established residential neighborhood for the most part, primarily singles, number of townhouses. There are some examples of apartment buildings in the neighborhood. But also there's commercial uses just to the northwest along Henry and Wayne Gretzky Parkway, and similarly institutional uses. There's a facility owned by Grand Erie District School Board to the west, the police station at the corner of Elgin and Wayne Gretzky Parkway. Just some photos of the site. I do apologize as the weather wasn't very cooperative back in January. It's a very large property, as I think all of you know. So from the official plan side of things, that's our local policy document here at the city. So the property is actually designated to land use designation, one's being parks and open space, which would be indicative of the previous former uses. And then a very small sliver along the northern limits and intensification corridor designation. That's indicative of the changing policy framework for the Henry Street roadway, where you tend to, or what the direction would be to push for more density and mixing of different uses. In this particular case, the applicant is proposing to go strictly to a residential land use designation. When land use planners and staff consider an official plan amendment, which is what before committee today, we typically do look at the policy direction that's established in the official plan. So the first point being the site's located in the city's built boundary. That policy direction comes out of the provincial policy statement. Very much in the situation as that's being proposed here today. What's being proposed is that redeveloping an underutilized land, intensification, those sort of terminology comes directly out of the PPS, very much in line with that policy document. In particular, too, there are minimum density targets and provisions that are established in the official plan with respect to development in the built-up area. So that's basically building what's currently there, using existing services versus greenfield development, which tends to be sort of on the outskirts of the city. And policy framework is a little bit different. The next point is the notion of a complete community that comes out of the growth plan. What that basically means is a community that has access to amenities, commercial facilities, institutional uses, parks, green spaces. Very much in line with this particular development, and what's being proposed here is establishing for a complete community, a mix of different housing options, being in a walkable neighborhood, very much in line with that direction out of the growth plan. When we look at the official plan and what is being proposed under residential designation, the official plan breaks out what is considered low, mid, and high-rise built form. And what I mean by that is what's being proposed, the particular buildings that are being proposed. So on the low-rise side of things, this is where you see singles towns up to 3 stories in height. They tend to be located on local roads, which is in line with what's being proposed. It's internal to the site. When you look at the mid-rise policy framework and similarly the high-rise policy framework, there's certain criteria that has to be hit in terms or established in terms of, for the most part, staff support of a rezoning and official plan designation. And that looks at being on a suitable size, its proximity to parks, open space. You need to be on a certain road classification. So in this particular case, they are located on a minor collector road. And then access to convenient access to transit. So that policy framework is the same for both the mid and high. The mid-rise built form up to 6 stories. When you look at high-rise built form, you're beyond 6, which would be consistent with the up to 8-story product that they're proposing. On the high-rise side of things, the policy framework's a little bit similar. The caveat, though, is you need to be within a certain distance of transit. And then convenient access to schools and parks and open space, which is indicative of how the site is ultimately laid out. The higher densities are along a major or a minor collector road, where the lower built form is internal to the site. So when looking at the zoning bylaw, the property actually has 4 different zones. Keep in mind, zoning does not follow property boundaries. It follows the center line of a street. So the northern parts of the property are previously in the Freeborn Road allowance. That's where you get the R4A, R1 being in R4A-47 zone. You can see the properties immediately to the north. That's how they're zoned. But for the most part, the site is zoned open space 1. That's indicative of the previous uses on the property. And just to highlight some of the site-specific zoning that's being proposed, so the singles R3-12, the -12 is a site-specific exception, and that is looking at, or what's being proposed is a marginal reduction on the lot area and rear yards. Once again, these are internal to the proposed development. The R4A 90 and 91 zone, what's being proposed is the street townhouse product, reductions on lot area, side yards, and lot coverage to both zones. The R4A 90 is the area in red. The area in blue or boxed on blue is the R4A-91. And then there's some unique provisions that are recommended and proposed in the rezoning. So on the open space side of things, so that's the product facing Stanley Street. We don't want to see what's called backlotting. That's sort of a planning term. Basically, we want those yards that you see along Stanley Street function as a front yard. So, that's the primary entrance to the point. And what that means is that access to parking, which is also a recommended zoning provision, would come in from Street C. So there wouldn't be individual driveways to those units to Stanley Street. It would very much function as as an internal sort of development with that particular build form. The R40-92 is the block and stack townhouse product that's being proposed. The applicant is seeking a reduction on the lot area in the block townhouse. For those that don't know, stacked townhouses, they're not explicitly permitted anywhere in the city, so typically they require a zoning bylaw amendment. And by doing so, you have to establish site-specific provisions for them, and that's consistent with other rezonings that have come before this committee in the past. In this particular case, the applicant is proposing that they are essentially the same as the block townhouse provisions with the exception of a rear yard and a side yard requirement. And then staff are recommending that because the site has been planned to be developed comprehensively, we don't want to see individual accesses to the condo site. So access to parking would be through a shared driveway. And what that in turn does is it will minimize impacts such as on-street parking. So you don't get that sort of spillover effect onto the surrounding neighborhood. So that's recommended through the zoning bylaw. In terms of the two apartment products, there's two site-specific zones proposed in RHD 31, RHD-32. The provisions for the 31 is the box or the 6-story building in red, as shown on the screen. They are seeking a slight reduction on the front yard and exterior side yard. What that does on the exterior side yard, it pushes the building further to the east. So by having a more reduced exterior side yard, you get that built form away from the singles that exist to the west of that block. And similarly, with the front yard, they're proposing to bring the building closer. Staff are recommending, though, in the parent RHD zone, there is a provision that says when you go above per story, you have to have 0.3 meters. In this particular case, staff feel that that's appropriate. And what that does, it minimizes massing when you're dealing with a 6-story building. On the RHD 32 zone, so that's the 6 to 8-story product on the northwest corner of the intersection there. The only real change to the RHD zone there is to allow for block townhouses, which are not permitted in that particular zone. So what that basically means is they are not seeking any reductions to parking, any of the other standard zoning requirements. So they're applying the as-of-right permissions to those blocks in the absence of having a detailed design for those buildings. So just one thing that I just wanted to highlight, that for the most part, the apartment buildings will be using the parent zoning provisions in the RHD zone. Another point to make too, and this is a staff recommendation, the RHD zone allows for apartment buildings up to 12 stories in height. Based on the work that has gone into this particular development, staff feel that the height should be capped as proposed. So that would be at the 8 for the one block and then 6 for the other block. And then the parkette walkway blocks and the stormwater pond, those would have corresponding open space zones that are prescribed in the zoning bylaw. So those are just standard
Jeff,
zones.
Jeff,
Yes.
can you wrap it up? 30 seconds.
Yes. On the development considerations, there's a number of holding provisions that are proposed. They deal specifically with a subdivision agreement, ensuring that servicing constrained financial matters are addressed. And then there's specific holding provisions that are proposed for the apartment blocks. And that's to ensure that an updated TIS comes back as well as more of a detailed design for those particular apartment buildings. I just want to hone in on the transportation assessment here. It's important to note that, yes, there will be some impacts for local traffic. However, the site itself or the local roads can accommodate some of the development at this time. But part of the holding provision is premised on the widening of Wayne Gretzky Parkway. There's an EA that will be scheduled in 2025. And what that basically means is the apartment buildings cannot proceed until the holding is lifted. And to satisfy that, essentially you would basically need Wayne Gretzky built to some standard or at least widened so that the intersection at Henry and Wayne Gretzky can be assessed further. On the existing natural features and vegetation, number of detailed reports went into that analysis. For the most part of
Jeff, you got 5 seconds.
Okay. So in conclusion, staff are recommending approval of the subject official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment, subject to all of the conditions. There's 101 that are being recommended to the plan of subdivision. Happy to answer any questions or comments. Thank you.
Thanks for, yes, Councilor McCreary.
Thank you, re-elected Chair Davis.
Yeah, we've gone beyond 10 minutes. So if you want to ask questions, you'll have to put a motion on the floor to extend the time.
I will do so
And what is your motion?
to extend the time.
By how much?
10 minutes.
Counselor Carpenter, I see you're seconding that?
Yes.
All right. I'll call the vote on that then.
I've got a question. If the time is extended, could I hear the complete report that was being presented? It was skipped over, and so we missed a little bit. Would that be possible?
Well, I'm sure we'll have Jeff. He's got another 10 minutes. He'll give us a thorough
Thank you, Chair.
review and conclusion on his report.
Motion is 10 minutes. See if it answers the question.
Yep.
The motion to waive the rules in order to provide staff additional 10 minutes carries on a recorded vote of 6-0. Those voting in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillor Secoli, Sless, McCreary, Carpenter, Councillor Van Tilburg.
So Jeff, you've got another 10 minutes. Perhaps you might go back to where I pushed you to.
Mayor, I believe I had the floor.
Yes. No, it's now goes to Jeff. You've got 10 minutes. Go ahead.
Mayor,
No, you don't.
I believe I have the floor.
No, you don't. We've extended the time for Jeff to make his presentation by 10 minutes. Jeff, would
No,
you
it was.
finish your presentation?
Mayor, my resolution was to receive and answer questions.
That's not what I'm ruling. I want to hear from Jeff for him to complete his application, and then we'll take questions.
Through you, Mr. Chair, thank you. Can I have the PowerPoint placed back on the screen, please? And thank you for the extension. I do just want to reiterate, this is a very comprehensive development. There's a number of complex applications that are before this committee, so I do apologize. It's quite difficult to get through the content in the timeframe, so I do appreciate the extension. So just to where I left off, I'm going to pass over the urban design component. Just to conclude on that specific part, the Department of Buildings will require site plan control. There's very little detail in terms of what those buildings will ultimately look like. So there may be a need for future zoning approvals. Those would be reviewed at a later date. With respect to archaeology and HIA, there was a phase 1 to 2 report. Typically with archaeology, it is regulated by the province. There's specific guidelines that archaeology studies need to be adhered to. So to deal with archaeology and the heritage requirements, there's a number of subdivision conditions that are recommended. I'm going to go back onto the existing natural features and vegetation. As I said, there's quite a bit of work that has gone into the site. 388 trees were inventoried. There had been some commentary from members of the public with respect to Kentucky coffee trees. A total of 6 were identified on the site. I just want to reiterate that although they are listed as an endangered species in Ontario, those provisions actually only apply to certain parts of the province. So in this particular case, or in this region, being in Brantford, they're actually not protected under the Endangered Species Act, and are most likely were planted in place on site. However, we've heard members of the public clearly on this, and we also understand the importance of those trees. There's a number of subdivision conditions that will deal with the Kentucky coffee trees in terms of the total tree replacement. And similarly with tree removal, 3-to-1 ratio is being recommended by staff and the subdivision conditions. What that basically means is that for every tree that's removed, 3 have to be replaced. And the idea is that we will work with the applicant to find a suitable location. As many will be replaced on site, or as another option, it would be cash in lieu as an example. On the environmental side too, we rely on, as I said, provincial policy, and typically there's a number of protections when you're in something called the natural heritage system. This property does not contain that. It's very much a human-made state. That's typically the case for former uses of this nature. So that would deal with obviously tree removal, or specifically the fact that the trees were planted on site and so forth. So it's not very much a naturalized environment. Any requirements regarding stormwater management and servicing, they will be addressed through the plan of subdivision process. Through the review of the applications, as I said, or the applicant said, there was a number of submissions that were made. Comments were provided from different departments and agencies, the school boards, utility corporations, different city staff. There's still a number of technical comments on the development. Typically with subdivisions, they are addressed at a later stage. So you get draft plan approval, and then there's a number of conditions that need to be addressed within a certain time frame. Through the public process, as the applicant said, we had a neighborhood meeting back in June of 2023. We received approximately 24 emails and letters, myself personally, For this particular meeting, the notification was provided under the Planning Act, so there's minimum requirements to notify the public. One thing I just wanted to note about that and consistency with the neighborhood meeting, notification was actually provided for the balance of the former land. So the entire property that existed before the land sale. So that would obviously capture a much larger area than if it was strictly to those 2 parcels of land. And then on the staff public meeting side of things, which is what we're here today, to date, I received 9 emails and letters, and actually I believe I received another email this morning. So just to hone in a little bit on the public input, as you can probably all appreciate, staff received quite a bit of feedback from members of the public. The first point about environmental site conditions, this deals with contaminants and soil conditions. There were some concerns raised about that. A development of this nature had completed 2 environmental reports, environmental site assessments. And what that basically means is they need to obtain a record of site condition from the Ministry of Environment. That is actually also tied to the holding provision. What that does is that the site can then be basically brought to a residential standard to allow for development. So there was.
Hey, Jeff, I'm going to give you 30 more seconds and I'm going to throw the floor open to questions.
Okay. So I'm just gonna, we'll just move forward. The public input is prescribed or illustrated in the staff report. Draft plan of subdivision, as I said before, staff are recommending 101 conditions, and that would deal with things such as phasing, servicing, swim, environmental considerations, how trees are removed, any transportation improvements that are required, any external agency requirements, and something called POPs, which are privately operated, publicly accessible spaces. So that would be a space that's owned by the condo corporations that would be established and then can be accessible to members of the public. So in conclusion, as I said before, staff are recommending approval of the subject zoning bylaw amendment, official plan amendment, and recommending approval of the draft plan of subdivision subject to conditions. Thank you.
Councilor McCurry.
Mayor, thank you. Jeff, the development has a stormwater management pond. Is that a legislative or statutory requirement of the province or other agencies that be included on this site?
Through the chair, Gary Peaver, manager of development engineering. No, through it's a city standard. If it's not legislated through the province.
That's sufficient. Thank you. I'm just looking for the yes or no. And what's our cost to maintain this stormwater management pond going to bear in future years?
Through the chair to yourself, Councilor McCurry, that hasn't been determined at this time for this particular design of this pond.
Could you state an example of a stormwater management pond elsewhere in the city and the cost to maintain it and the frequency of that work?
Through the chair, throughout the city, there are various capital projects to clean out a pond that has been established. They could range anywhere around the $500,000 mark, but typically those don't happen, over the timelines of 20 to 30 years. The cost aspect of it is got to be compared to the actual potential flooding downstream of this area. Without that stormwater pond, there could be significant flooding and additional costs that the city would potentially be that have to look at when a flooding occurred. So the pond is mitigating the measures that could be impacted downstream of the site.
So we have had this policy in effect for not very many years, right, Gary? The stormwater management pond requirement?
Through the chair, this design policy has been around for, I would say, over plus 20 years.
And we've, in my time on this council, we've cleaned a number of these things and it's been very dear. What's the cost being of remediating problems resulting from not having these?
Through the chair, that would be a hard number to kind of put together, but there are instances in the industrial area that the city of Brantford does not have stormwater management ponds, and that the city was within, I believe, within the $15 to $20 million range on the hook of cleaning downstream infrastructure, that because there's no stormwater ponds to manage the stormwater coming off those sites, the city did have to pay in the millions of dollars to remediate downstream areas.
What's the anticipated revenue from taxation on these lands?
Through the chair, that's been undetermined at this time.
Anybody care to venture a guess? A range?
Through the chair, Brian.
I promise.
Through the chair, Brian Hutchings, CEO. This has been publicly reported on our housing reports. Finance has done initial calculation about 3 years ago. The tax revenue of these properties, roughly $2 million a year.
Okay, so even at the worst case, we'll still come out ahead on a year when we have to do this. Now, it was mentioned that we fulfilled a minimum notification requirement with respect to providing information to the public. Is there a maximum requirement?
So through the chair to the counselor, Nicole Wilmot, Director of Planning and Development Services, there is no maximum.
Okay, thank you.
But I would say that we didn't just notify to the minimum. We went beyond the typical standards in terms of the notification area as well as hosting a neighborhood meeting. Those are all requirements outside of the Planning Act.
So the minimum, the word minimum is redundant, then we fulfilled the requirement.
That is correct.
Yeah, okay. And sorry, could somebody reiterate the number of responses and inquiries we had aside from the folks that appeared today?
Through the chair to the counselor, there was 24 prior to this meeting with respect to emails. I believe over the last 12 hours or so, probably about 10 have come in. So I would say roughly 35.
Thank you very much for that.
Councillor Carpenter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Jeff, good job on this file. You've done a lot of work, 101 recommendations. I can't think of a few things that you've missed that were covered. To the planner for the developer, when we had the public meeting, thank you very much. You answered everyone's questions politely and patiently, and those involved were not very thrilled or happy, and you accepted a lot of sometimes criticism, but I just want to thank you for answering every question and looking at your plan, recognizing most of those concerns. I'll start off with that. Secondly, the parkette, Jeff, that little parkette has no access points to the future park then? And the design doesn't show that.
Through you, Mr. Chair, it will at some point. I mean, that will need to be figured out through detailed design in terms of how that access is established. The park is also intended to provide access to an underground service that runs through that portion of the property.
And it will have the other access to the park, I think, is from the condominium apartment building at the southeastern corner of the property. If I heard the developer right.
That would be the storm pond, I believe, because there's two parcels, correct?
Yep. Well, the one the developer showed the design access to the park by the apartment on the far side of the development. He highlighted it in brown in his original proposal. I hadn't seen it in my design.
Yeah, that's correct. So there would be potentially a future access to the park in the southwestern limits, and that would be through the park. There was a walkway block delineated previously that was removed and combined with the storm pond block. That doesn't necessarily mean that there won't be an access to the park.
And the storm pond will be fenced before any development starts, or once the storm water management pond is going to be built first, as I understand it, and then it's going to be fenced?
Through the chair to you, it's been undetermined if it needs to be fenced. It's based on ministry criteria in the stormwater management for the province of Ontario, but it would be one of the first items to be built.
Okay,
So
but it can
Councillor
be.
Carpenter, I'm gonna have to cut it off there. We've gone slightly beyond 10 minutes unless there is another motion on the floor to extend further.
Motion to extend another 10 minutes.
All right, so we do have a seconder on that. Second by Councillor McCreary.
Just speaking to it, this is a
we can
very
take the
important
vote.
development in the
Yep.
community, and I think that we should give it as much attention as possible.
All right, I'll call for the vote on the further 10-minute extension.
The motion to waive the rules to extend the time for an additional 10 minutes carries on a recorded vote of 6-0. Those voting in favor, Mayor David, Councillor Sokoli, Sless, McCreary, Carpenter, Van Tilburg.
Carry on, Councillor Carpenter.
Thank you. As part of the development, all the streets, A, B, and C, they'll all be, there's 2 streets actually, but they'll all be wide enough for fire protection. There will be parked cars on the street. The parking will not be permitted in order to make it fully accessible to fire.
Yes, that's correct. They would be built to a city standard.
Well, they all also have sidewalks.
I'll jump in, Jeff. Through the chair, Gary, To your counselor, there may be opportunity for on-street parking in those internal streets that are going to be municipally owned. They would still meet our standard and meet all the requirements for fire truck movements.
And the width of the street would be city standard, so even if we had parking on one side, we wouldn't be able to have on both sides to get a fire truck, okay? And the street towns that are fronting onto Stanley Street. Stanley Street itself will have a full sidewalk built into it. It doesn't have one now.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Now, that will mean that we will plant boulevard, we'll leave room for boulevard trees and plant boulevard trees along that side of Stanley Street as well?
Yes.
Is there any chance that we could put coffee trees, Kentucky coffee trees back in that boulevard?
That is a possibility. 18 are proposed to be replaced as one of the subdivision conditions, even though there's only 6 currently on the property.
Yeah, I'm just throwing that suggestion out there. The other, well, the 3-for-1 trees that will be planted, you're looking for locations. I don't support cash in lieu of for trees because cash doesn't clean the air like a tree does. But could we put those trees on the park side of the development, backing onto this development itself? So the houses and everything that backs onto the park will have trees on that side of it, shielding that development from the park and shielding the park from all the development on that side.
Through the chair, to yourself, Councillor Carpenter, yeah, we are looking at every opportunity to get more trees in the ground, whether it's on private property or current city property.
Okay, yeah, that's very helpful. And I'll come back to there's a number of conditions here in the report. And throughout the report, before you get to the 101 conditions, we had such suggestions where staff were recommending. Do those recommendations actually become conditions on the 101 conditions? The word recommending was used quite a bit. Then in the condition, it says will be required.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, that's typically the case with subdivisions. So for the most part, when you look at the conditions, there's a number of technical reports that were submitted through the review. Typically with a subdivision, the applicant is to implement the recommendations of some of these reports, and those are to the satisfaction normally to the city as a subdivision condition.
And one more question, Gary, on the stormwater management pond. We've had flooding in that area at that corner of of the Airedale in the past that flooded into the neighboring houses. And so that stormwater management pond should alleviate any of those concerns going forward, because it'll be capturing all the water from the development.
Through the chair, it might not alleviate all existing conditions that might be out there today, but I do want to stress enough that without that stormwater management pond, it would significantly increase the flooding occurrences in that area. The storm sewer that is currently adjacent to this property is well undersized for any development on this site.
So would the stormwater management pond provide us with the ability, when the park is developed, to make sure that any runoff from the park can actually access to the stormwater management pond as well, so that we could alleviate any flooding from our lands?
Through the chair, we could definitely look at that opportunity. It would depend on some of the grading of the park.
Okay, thank you for now.
Councillor Sluss.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Most has been asked. I had concerns raised to me about shadows. When the mid-rise and the high-rise building go in, I would presume there would be shadow studies done.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, that's correct. Assessment was done for this application. Keep in mind though, or for these application, keep in mind, there's detailed design hasn't been completed yet. And so staff are recommending the holding specific to the apartment buildings. They need to basically update that study before the holding is lifted from the zoning, once detailed design is completed. So that will normally be done at site plan control stage.
Okay, can the folks that live immediately across from these proposed buildings, can they have assurance that they won't be affected?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the city has standards with respect to shadows. So staff will ensure that they meet the city standard for shadow impacts. We'll do our best to ensure that there won't be any impacts on the neighboring properties.
Okay, are these such things as stepping up with the buildings and the things that we've seen recently?
Correct. Shadow impacts typically comes down to building placement, how it's articulated. So if there's terracing, balconies, massing, there's a number of ways that shadows are cast. And then a lot of it really does come down to the architectural design of the building.
Okay, thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.
And secondly, Mr. Mayor, is the school property. That's something that's new to me. Are they obligated to supply land for a school should it be requested by the school board?
Through you, Mr. Chair, typically schools do get involved in the subdivision process and they do have the right to request a location for a school block. I can confirm, and it's noted in the staff report, both schools at the time that the applications were circulated did not request the location of a school block for either school boards. However, they did provide some commentary. Those are incorporated into the subdivision conditions, but school boards do have the right to ask and or request that a school block be reserved in a plan of subdivision.
Okay, well, Jeff, anybody can request anything. Can they demand?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I would say they could. Typically, school boards are regulated under different legislation by the province, and a lot of their funding is premised on provincial funding. So school blocks can be reserved. They can be sitting there for years before the schools actually get built.
Okay, but I guess to make the question shorter, if the school board needs a school there, they have legal authority to put one there.
Through the chair to the counselor, I don't want to get into the semantics of legal authority, but I think at the end of the day, the school boards have identified that there's a site. Generally speaking, the city and the developer work to ensure that that happens so that we can basically meet our goals of providing complete communities. So in this instance, the school board, while at the time of the circulation of the application didn't seem overly interested in providing a school, since that time they've reconsidered and they are working with the developer to potentially locate a school within this block. And so it's been identified for transparency reasons, but at this time, it's not come to fruition. So we're not requesting any development considerations at this time.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Scully.
Thank you. And through you to staff, I just have a question regarding the inner block, the condo, the three-story stacked townhomes. In the drawings, it looks like they're really just sitting on the road, and I see that we're providing an exemption for the side yards. On page 25 of the report, it doesn't say what the standard is in our bylaw, it just shows the exemption down to 3 meters. Can you just let me know what the actual parameters are that we're reducing down to?
Through you, Mr. Chair, keep in mind on page 25, stacked townhouses don't actually have any zoning permissions as of right. So we're establishing them through the zoning bylaw. If you were to look at the block townhouse products, which stacked townhouse function very similar, they're typically in condo sort of development. For an interior side yard, you're looking at 2.4 meters as being the standard. And then 3 meters is the exterior side yard.
So is the drawing maybe just not to scale? Because it looks like they're really sitting on the road.
It's very
and
conceptual. Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that we were providing some buffer there because it looks like they're really sitting on the road. That's everything for me. Thank you.
So committee members, there are other council members that are here that aren't members of the committee, and they're also entitled to ask questions after committee members have exhausted all of their questions. Are there any other questions that members of the committee have before I go to other council members that are in attendance? Not seeing any. Councillor Martin, I think you raised your hand.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate the chance to speak. The last meeting on this subject, I was barred from speaking. But the coffee tree is not something I'm familiar with. Is it suitable for boulevard, or does it create a mess when in the fall or spring if it drops fruit?
Through the chair, the Kentucky coffee tree does drop its fruit in various stages of the year. So it can be a bit of a messy tree. Again, we haven't determined locations of where they could be planted, but that was something we would consider with the ward councillors when we get to the detailed design.
Okay, and are they readily available in this area? Because it's not one I'm familiar with.
Through the chair, they are readily available for planting, yes.
Thank you.
Yes, Councillor Hunt.
Thank you. And through you to Jeff, you mentioned a holding provision on the apartment buildings, which has to be in conjunction with the widening of Wayne Gretzky Parkway. That is, I believe, on the map, phase 4 and 5. Is there any holding provision regarding traffic? So we're getting significant concerns about the amount of traffic that's gonna come out onto Stanley and then get to that intersection at Henry and Gretzky Parkway. So can you speak to the traffic impact study prior to the actual apartment building holding?
For sure. So how the holding is actually worded is that they have to come back with an updated a traffic impact assessment. And what that assessment will need to consider is the impacts of traffic specifically at the intersection of Henry Street and Wayne Gretzky Parkway. Right now, there is some queuing that's observed at that location. And what that would basically mean is that in order to fully assess that, the widening would need to occur. Those two particular blocks have quite a bit of density versus the balance of the development. So the holding ensures that before we can lift the holding, they have to do an updated traffic report to basically analyze those sort of traffic impacts.
Okay, and.
Sorry, Councillor Hunt, we've got a little bit beyond the additional 10 minutes.
Thank you.
So we'll have to call it there unless there's another resolution put on the floor by committee members. Not seeing that. We'll now move. Thank you very much, Jeff and staff, for that extended presentation, question answering session. So we'll now move into, we're now that part of this hearing this morning where members of the public can provide their input in respect to this application, either in opposition to or in support of the application. I know we have some members of the public that are here today. So now is the time to come forward if you'd like to speak to this application, either in support of or against. So I'm looking out to the audience. Is there anyone present who would like to come forward? Yes, sir. Why don't you come forward? So you need to come up to the delegates table here. And the speaker is on for you. If you would first state your name and your address, and then you'll have 10 minutes.
My name is Walter Doctor. I'm at 230 Bruce Street. And I strongly oppose and urge any counselor to oppose this. There's just too much, too many people in the neighborhood don't approve this. It hasn't been fully researched to what the real residents in that area want and desire. It's just too much, too fast. Thank you.
Hang on, Walter, but some of the committee members might have some
Okay.
questions for you. Okay. Any questions for Walter? Seeing none. Thank you very much, sir. Oh,
I had a
Brian,
question.
hang on, Walter. We do have Councillor Van Tilburg. Sorry about that, Councillor Van Tilburg.
Yes, Walter, in my experience, I'd heard from other constituents that they had been contacted by, I don't know the individuals, but people that were telling them that the number of units and types of homes would be significantly different from what was proposed. Did you have that experience, or is this all that you're aware of at this time?
I believed at the very beginning, before it even was sold or anything like that, that council had mentioned there could be up to 350 units built at that time, before it was even sold, when they were proposing it. Then it came back that the initial one from the developer said 700 units, I believe. Now it's 754, subject to a couple of more levels being added to a couple of those units in there. The apartment, the the apartments, they're going up to 8 stories. So that's going to increase it. And to say that Elgin Street is a minor road is just wrong. You obviously don't live in the neighborhood and see how much traffic that is. The cops, that's a main way for the police to get through the city, is up and down Elgin Street, right past there. I live there. I know what it's like. I hear the sirens every day going up and down there. So to say it's a minor road with minor traffic, come on.
Thank you, Walter.
Hang on, Walter. Maybe still a couple more questions.
Okay.
Councillor McCurry.
Thank you, Mayor. There was a meeting June 15th. Were you in attendance at that one?
Yes, I was.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I think that those are all the questions. Thank you very much again, sir.
Yep.
All right. Yes, ma'am. Want to come forward, please? Yeah, we'll turn the mic on there for you. It'll turn red. So you'll have to state your name and your address, and then you'll have 10 minutes to make your presentation.
Okay, Marilyn Clarkson. I live on Arthur Street in Brantford, and I have one question and one comment. To start with, the area at the end of Campbell Street that's marked as Block 7 was originally residential lots. On the map, it shows the lots numbered east from lot 15 and marked as lots 16 to 20, with lots 30 to 34 marked on Elgin Street. Okay, my question is, how was the decision made to include this block 7 in the sale? And my comment is, if block 7 has to lose status as open space, then I think it would be more suitable to have the lot zoned for single-family houses rather than an apartment complex. Thank you.
Sorry, Marilyn, you said you live on Campbell Street. What number on Campbell Street?
Pardon?
I think you said that you live on,
No, I live
Arthur
on
Street.
Arthur Street,
sorry, what number on Arthur Street?
84.
84. All right. So the way this works is it's a public hearing, and so people make their presentation to us. It's not like a town hall where it's a back and forth, but I'm keeping track of your questions, and when the applicant comes forward again at the end, generally we'll ask the applicant the questions that come up through the hearing. So we may have other members of the committee. Yes, Councillor Carpenter has a question for you.
Yeah, thanks for coming. So your concern is the 6-story apartment building that's at the end of Campbell Street and on the new Maitland Street extension.
I'm sorry, I have trouble hearing.
Okay, you're talking about the 6-story apartment building at the end of Campbell Street and at Maitland Street, where Maitland Street comes through.
Yes.
You would rather see that zoned for single-family homes?
Yes, and I believe the original plan, which was not official, that was proposed when they mentioned the 300 plus, that they did mark it as continuing with the lots as single family. And since then, since they put in the official request, it changed to an apartment building.
And is that your concern because it's next to single-story Brantford cottage style houses?
Yes.
And then we're putting this at 6-story right up against them. Right. All right. Thanks for coming.
Well, Ms. Clarkson, doesn't look like there are any other questions. Thank you very much for coming forward.
Okay, one more thing. I think, I'm not sure my question about block 7 included in the sale would be more directed to whoever was responsible for the sale, like the whole process, because
Yeah,
I
we're
mean,
not,
it would be back and forth, I guess.
yeah, questions duly noted. Thank you. Certainly, sir. So again, you'll have to state your name.
Yeah, Roger
And-
Snowdragon, 84 Arthur Street in Brantford.
Right.
I am totally against this zoning change. Which is futile because this decision was made even before the sale was announced. You guys have already decided, it's game over. But I just want to voice my opposition to this. It's a bad idea. It will not benefit the city per se. It will benefit developers and real estate agents and what have you. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Yeah, so again, if there's other members of the public, yes, ma'am, you're coming forward. We'll just turn the microphone on for you, and if you would state your full name and address, then you'll have 10 minutes.
My name is Tammy White and I live at 392 Rodden Street, directly across, which was number 8 of Airedale Golf Course. That home has been in my family for over 90 years. My mother moved there when she was 5. It's been a part of who I am and my family, a great place to grow up. A place where my dad took my brothers to teach them the game of golf, which is isn't just a game. It's a bonding experience for father and sons. It's a place where manners were learned, to respect, characters were built. A lot of things that the youth of today don't have. Looking out our front window, seeing Airedale, hearing the sound of a golf ball being hit. I know for a lot of you that have not lived in the area or don't live in the area, that's hard to understand. But not hearing that sound in the summertime, it's affecting me, my well-being sometimes. I'm a very, very, very opposed to this development. My parents, if they were alive today, would both be here. They would be very opposed to it too. Growing up in that neighborhood, Linda grew up in that neighborhood. It's a great place to grow up as a kid, to be able to experience that open space in the wintertime. 9 people filled out a survey, or in a survey, 9 people asked for a dog park and got a dog park. That's the size of postage stamps, by the way. The open area in front of my house is now a full-fledged dog park where it's an off-leash dog park, by the way, where people let their dogs go to the washroom anywhere and everywhere. No one picks it up. The summertime when the heat comes and the smell that's going to come into my house is going to be disgusting. Over close to 9 or 8,000 people opposed this development. And yet here we are again, talking about rezoning, talking about what, the effects, the apartments, blah, blah, blah. When we were at the meeting in June, we left with, recommendations, changes. Now they've come back with an extra 14 units to be built there. So let's go back again and maybe we can get 800 units in that lot now. From the get-go, I'm opposed to it. I always will be. Thank you.
Yeah, any questions for Tammy? Councilor Carpenter.
Tammy, you mentioned that when this was sold in 2019, the neighborhood was promised a park. Are you completely disappointed that the park has not been built yet?
In a way, yes. In a way, not. There's a lot of homelessness in our area. There's Cedars right across the street from my house. There's 2 shopping carts full of items parked there right now. So with the park, at least they'd have somewhere that they could wash because there's supposed to be some type of splash pad there. The only consolation for me is because of where I'm situated is that park will be across the street from my house. I won't have to deal with the houses. I won't have to deal with the shading issues. I won't have to deal with the apartment buildings. I won't have to deal with any of it. Aside from, I'll get the consolation prize.
But Tammy, you mentioned, but it is a city property, the city, so are you suggesting that the land isn't being maintained because the people that dogs?
It's not being maintained at all. The garbage cans are full where the new boulders are in the new parking lot there. There's garbage cans overflowing. When they put new bags in, they fly in the wind. The garbage just flies all over. And there are people with their dogs out there. They're off leashing and it's not right. And my husband sits at the side window on the couch and yells, "Pick that up." People can't see him. But nobody's picking up the dog feces in that park at all, and it's everywhere in that open area.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, Tammy. So any other member? Yes, ma'am. Come forward. Ma'am, if you want to speak, if you come forward, please, we'll turn the microphone on for you. If you'd state your full name, please, and your address, then you'll have 10 minutes.
Hello, my name's Wendy Carter. I'm a resident of Brantford, but not in the ward of Airedale. I just asked Jeff if he would call up the visual that I sent in with my email. So we'll find that out in a minute. My story is called On a Positive Note. This is not about winning or losing any longer. What we'll have lost, you can see in this drone photo by Brian Thompson of the Expositor. It was the one that was in this past week. Okay, I'll proceed anyway, and there may come a chance later. Okay.
Yeah,
I'd like-
Wendy, members of the committee have received your picture.
But the members of the public haven't. Okay, I'll proceed. I'd like to.
There you go. We've got it up for you.
Oh, thank you. Super. Oh, whoever did that. I'd like to see recognition of Airedale's history paid to it by both the developer on their land and the city in Airedale Park. Show poster. Thank you. Some of the $4 million of the budget for the park should be used for public art for it that shows Airedale's history. That is golf in spring, summer, fall, and winter, and the winter sports. Perhaps it could be in the parkette under the Kentucky coffee trees, a species at risk. You could include this photo by Brian Thompson as the wooden sign on the wooden sign to show people how gorgeous those tree hills really are. It was designed by a famous landscape architect named Nicole Thompson and officially opened in 1927. But it was used before that as the developer's heritage impact study states. He and Nicole and his brother Stanley designed some of the most prestigious golf courses in this country, including Banff, Shadoke. The magazine Canadian Golfer was published here and has various stories about it in the 1900s about Airedale. I would be willing to provide resources if you'd like. The landscape architect designed much of Brantford. That was noted in the Canadian Golfer. Excuse me. Airedale has been a part of our local geographical, sport, and social history for over 100 years, so please respect it. From the Heritage Inventory document, quote, the property has contextual value because it is a landmark, end quote, criteria met. Commemorate it and honor it, please. Make the tribute something to be proud of and educate people with historical images, QR codes, quote, codes, as referred to in the developer's heritage impact study document. Make it a fitting display and respectful to those hills, please. Thank you.
Ms. Carter, could you please give us your address as well?
It's Ward 1.
We ask people if they come forward to be a delegate that they provide us with their address as well for future notification.
On public video?
All right, thank you very much. Are there any questions now
Thank you.
for Wendy? Seeing none, thank you very much. Any other member of the public present would like to come forward? Yes, ma'am. If you'd state your name, please, and your address, and then you have 10 minutes to make your
I'm
presentation.
Barbara Fleming. I live at 201 Campbell Street, right up against Airedale.
I'd like to say that I disagree with the whole selling of Arrowdale and the rezoning. I don't know how you can do this to Ward 4 and 5 residents who pay taxes for years. What will compensation will elite pay for the ward residents for the 5 to 7 years of constructions with dust, noise, rats, quality of life? We pay for the cleaning of my pool and filter. What will happen if there's damage to my yard, being that it is higher up than Arrowdale? Can you guarantee me specified times the construction will be starting and finished every day? With all this going on, all summer, our windows will have to be closed using our ACs more. There again, more filters. I would like to stress that trees let sun through and buildings do not. And they stop cross breezes for fresh air. I have loved my area, being a resident for over 30 years there. I have worked hard to keep it private and safe. With the road construction on Campbell, that means the safety and the privacy is at risk. And personally, I'm angry by all the land, the Arrowdale, that you had to build and put the apartment buildings right beside me. The building will block the sun to my pool and my garden. My house is west of the towers. Once again, I disagree with the rezoning.
Thank you, Ms. Fleming. We'll see if there are any questions for you. Councillor Carpenter.
Barb, thanks for coming. Were you quite surprised to see a 6-story apartment building next to your 1-story house?
I was surprised, but
And the way the
But-
sun sets and rises is gonna impact your house. The
really,
shadow
I'm an
will have
avid gardener too, and that's gonna really,
So the shadow study will show that there will be access. I would advise everyone in the area to videotape their house prior to construction, so if there's any cracks or changes in your house, that you have some proof that it happened.
yeah, and I'm
as a
worried about
result
my
of
pool. Like,
construction.
my yard is higher than all the other yards around me.
Okay. And are you concerned about, you used to live at a quiet dead end street, and now you're gonna be on a street that's gonna be
That
continued?
street is a beautiful street, like for the privacy and activities that go on down there, and all the families that walk from around the area, that walk down around the area.
Do you have any concern about the apartment block having access to the park?
Definitely. That whole area is, it's not right.
Thanks, Barb, for coming.
They should leave us as a dead end. I don't see how that's really gonna help compensate much without just going to Elgin.
Thanks, Barb.
Councillor Hunt.
Through you, thank you very much, Barb, for coming.
Yeah. I got no choice.
I know that you've had some significant issues with the standards of the property as the developer. And you certainly have reached out to me several times regarding grass that's not cut.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. I'm wondering if you can just, speak to the fact that, as you said, you've got a beautiful yard with a pool and a garden, and then on the other side of the fence is.
It was a war zone.
Is, yes.
About
okay.
6-foot grass and the grass around the fire hydrants, and nobody kept that area up.
Yeah, okay. All right. Thanks again for coming. I just wanted to get that out on the record.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Ms. Fleming. Is there any other member of the public that would like to come forward? Okay, well, Sandra, we'll take you first. Someone else would like to speak behind. Anyways, you're next. Again, if you'd state your full name and your address, then you have 10 minutes.
My name is Sandra Bigger. I live at 92 Superior Street in Brantford. Been a Brantford resident all my life. I'm just really concerned about what I'm seeing on these reports that we received. What will the classification of the balance of the property be? Will it still be open space? The park area, is that going to be a separate zoning, or is it going to be something else? Can we have 4 different zones in a small piece of land? The other thing I'm concerned about is there was a notation in there that said site-specific provisions, regulations are proposed to the applicable zones to facilitate the redevelopment of the subject lands for 764 residential units. What are these provisions and regulations? I think we need a little more detail on what's involved in that. That's written right in the document that we received. This is basically for city staff. My other interest is what is going to happen to the former FC Bodley School? There is a school sitting on that parkland on that area. I don't know what it's zoned anymore because I don't think anybody knows what it's zoned anymore. But there is a school that used to be FC Bodley that was used for Sheila, which is for educating adults that want to come back and get their high school qualification and so on. What is going to happen to that facility? And now we're talking about the fact that there won't be enough schools in the area for school children, which everybody knew when they heard the numbers. And could we not repurpose that school as a school? I'm just throwing this out there, just wondering what's going on and what's going to happen to Gila. The other thing I observed is that most of the details on the copies we received are really too small to read or to do anything with. They are virtually the same drawings that we received at the previous meeting with very few changes or consideration. Now, that the exception to that is the presentation today did include some more detail, and it did give small snippets of the street elevations, which is definitely helpful. I think the main thing that you need to show are some side elevations of what this whole building is going to look like, what this whole development will look like when it's finished. I don't think anyone can really visualize what it's going to look like. We see it from the top view, but we don't see the side. So we know how the slope is going to be integrated and what it's actually going to look like. I think that would be very helpful for the neighborhood and for the taxpayers of Brantford. There's no landscaping plan or tree removal replacement. And I know Jeff tried to address that quickly as he discussed the report. And I have seen the report that he was referring to, but it's not very specific on what we are going to actually see in the way of green space in this area. There does not appear to be any input whatsoever from the Indigenous people on this proposal. Since this development is proposed in the Haldeman Tract Act, there should be some consideration and documentation attached to this proposal. I've seen nothing. Where is the proposal for solar power or geothermal energy to make it more environmentally friendly? This is what we're missing on these kind of things. Where are the proposed drainage provisions and the site elevation plans? Once more, the site elevations are critical. You have to see what this thing's going to look like when it's finished. Who is responsible for snow removal, garbage pickup, lighting, security, and road repairs and management? That hasn't really, it's sort of been said that it'll be the city, but it's also been said some of it's going to be private land. Who's going to be responsible for what? And how's this going to be determined and assessed? Where will the excess snow go when the plows come by and remove it? There's not going to be a lot of room there to put any excess snow. What are they going to do about getting rid of the snow? What is the percentage of owner-occupied residential units and rental units? There's been nothing that says how much of it is rental, how much of it is owner-occupied. I think it would definitely help a little bit to have those numbers up there. When will the height of the apartment buildings, whether it be 6 or 8 or 10, when are they going to decide what the heights are going to be? You really can't proceed too far without knowing what the height of the building is going to be. In terms of shadow calculations, without knowing the height, how can you know what the shadow will be? What is the estimated population density for this area? I'd be curious to know. Haven't seen anything whatsoever on that. Where will the parking area be located? And I guess the parkette then is just a park. I interpreted this as a parking area, a little parkette for parking cars, but I guess apparently it's going to be a green space. So where are we going to park all the cars that are going to be coming into this area? I think, and this is going to rub people the wrong way, but I think that there should be some consideration given to naming the new street, subdivision, or area, Airedale Place, Airedale Drive, or Airedale Subdivision, to maintain the historical context of the neighborhood. And the lady that spoke here, just the previous lady, not the one just before, but the one before me, that spoke about trying to reconcile the neighborhood. It's a critical thing. There has to be some healing go on. If this is going to actually occur, there has to be some kind of process to help people get through it, whether it involves community art or being involved in what's going to be done in the parklands. People need to feel like they have some say in their own neighborhood. They're having to adjust to huge changes in the area they've lived in for many years. We need to find a way to make them feel like they're part of the process and that they have some say in what actually goes in this area. There has to be some kind of a healing process because this is very difficult for the people that live there. I don't live there personally, but I know how difficult this is for Brantford people to accept. Airedale was a historical thing that was unique to Brantford, and now we're taking it away. We need to try and find some ways to assist people to adjust to it. And that's all I have to say.
We'll see if there are any questions. Yes, Councilor Carpenter.
When you're talking about Jelly, you're talking about the school?
Yes.
That's owned by the public school board, and it's not part of city property. It's owned by the school board itself. I have no.
So they own the land that Bodley is sitting on?
Yes, they do.
Okay,
School board
so-
owns the land and the school.
So
and-
what is that zone?
Well, and we don't know whether the application from the developer was by the Catholic school board for a different kind of school. So whether the school board wants to provide schooling, that's up to them. The rest we've talked about before. Thanks.
Okay,
All right, thank you very much, Lon.
thank you.
Anyone else like to come forward? Yes. You would state your full name, please, address, and then you'll have 10 minutes.
Hi, my name is Deanna Tompkins. I live at 189 Elgin Street. I have been to a lot of these meetings. I wasn't planning on speaking. I never have out of fear of public speaking and that, but I wanted to speak because I wanted to be noted because numbers seem to be a big thing before during this meeting when I was listening about the people that actually came and represented those that are opposed to it. I took the time off today from work because this is something that's very important to me. And even though I am just one person here, I am actually representing many people that can't make it because of obligations. I don't really have any points to say. I just really want to note about me because everyone before me took the words from my mouth, like the one parcel that's by itself for the 6-foot apartment building. I was under the understanding that it was going to be dwellings. So there's lots of little things like that, that I definitely agree with what they said.
Yeah, I think we may have some questions for you, Councilor Carpenter.
Thanks for coming. So you had to take time off work and lose pay because we're holding these meetings in the day when most people work.
Yes, definitely. There's been many that I have missed, but this is getting down to the nitty gritty and the little stuff like listening to the developer and all that. Like I really wanted to understand because I feel like, as was said before, the stuff that we get in the mail, it's not explanatory. We don't understand it. So definitely took the time off.
So are you suggesting that we should be holding meetings that are so important to the public in a time when the public can actually attend?
Most definitely, or definitely have like maybe 2 that are doing the exact same thing at different times so people can actually make them. My understanding is that even if this passes too, it's like in 2 weeks, you're going to have the finalized thing. That's not enough time for people to book stuff off.
Thank you. Thanks for coming.
Councilor Hunt.
Thank you very much for coming. You are on the opposite side, so you're looking at.
I can see, yeah, Elgin Street, the Airedale from my bedroom window. I'm like 4 houses down from that new parcel. That's going to be the apartment building.
So your concern is not only the fact that there's going to be an apartment building there, but also what you're going to be looking at and the entire construction phase, which is going to be obviously.
Everything in the entirety, like everyone mentioned it, from the snow removal to the parking, everything is a concern. Are they going to be filling up our streets with their parking now because they don't have enough there? There's a lot of concerns.
Okay, thanks so much for coming.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hopkins. Oh, sorry, I think Councilor Van Tilburg had a question for you, so you have to come back. Go ahead, Councilor Van Tilburg.
Well, I appreciate you taking a day off work. I am aware of many others that couldn't be here. Previous to what you've seen today, were you under the impression at some time that this was all supposed to generally be residential houses within the neighborhood, that was what was being pitched to the neighbors in the area?
well, the first thing that was pitched was this was for low income. That's the whole reason we were selling Airedale. But when it came to the actual development, which we all knew was going to be a Toronto builder coming to do it, that was our big point. We were told it was only going to be around the 300 to 400. I don't have the exact number, but it was going to be way less. So when the original paper that came out, I don't know when the first one came out with the exact same plan as this last one, came out and showed in the 700s, definitely I was floored, absolutely upset.
Yes, and many neighbors seem to have that same number and figure. Do you know where you got it? Were you being contacted by possibly other counselors or like, I know when I was asking people saying, where did you hear this from? I was hearing, counselors or somebody contacted them. And because they had information I didn't have on this 300 and stuff units at the time. So I just was wondering, how did you manage to hear that?
There's been so many meetings that I've been to, and from our own little meetings of us getting together to the actual council meetings like this, just sitting in the back, listening, taking notes. I'm not truly sure where that number's from, but honestly, I want to say it was around the 440 that is stuck in my head.
And you've been able to look at the green space across from your property for quite some time. What do you think of this layout on how much green space there will be left compared to how much there was, like the way they're building on it? Do you think there's a lot of green space left there?
No, most definitely not. And it's not just from me living there. I was born and raised in Brantford. This is where we went. If I didn't play golf, my family played golf. This is where we went, tobogganing, everything. Like, it's not just green space. It's a space for the community. But as it comes to the green space that you're asking me about, the one in the actual development area seems very minute and not a lot at all. And then when it comes to the park that we have, it is, I don't know what city's plan is on it. Like, it seems so unusable. It's just hilly. That's all one hill down towards Rawdon there. As the person mentioned, there's dogs just roaming free. They have a dog park over there, but that is so small. It's unusable. It's not even smart the way it was planned out. There's just so many things. And no, I don't think the green space is adequate to what it is and what we were promised.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Councilor Hunt? Oh, Ms. Hopkins, there's still one more question.
No, got this many.
I'm trying to, sorry, and I don't mean to put you on the spot.
Okay.
I'm trying to alleviate the questions around the proposed 300 and I believe it was 31 units.
Okay.
And I have also seen it. It actually was a link put out by the developer when they were purchasing the property.
I was gonna say, I thought it was.
You have a
city
question,
meeting.
Councilor Hunt?
Oh.
We're at
Did
questions,
you see
please.
the link?
Possibly. It's been so long that we've been fighting this.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I think that might be
Thank
it. Ms. Hopkins, thank you very much. Yes, we have another member of the audience, public coming forward. If you state your name, please, your address, then you have up to 10 minutes.
Live at 191 Campbell Street.
Go ahead, Ms. Harden.
Every question I have are ones that I had in June at that meeting that have not been answered. I'd really rather not do this here, but apparently this is my only choice. First of all, the 300 houses was right at the beginning before the sale. We heard it from you guys that it would be approximately 300 to 400 houses up there. Now it's 700 and what, 64? That's unreal. Who's paying for all the infrastructure? Will it be me through my tax dollars for something we don't even want? And yes, I'm against the sale, I'm against the development, and I'm against the rezoning. The apartments being where they put them, looking into our private backyards, I'll never agree with. Never. They're way high. They're going to be seeing everything that goes on in our backyards. I also want to know the benefits of this development for us that live right there, who have for 40 years lived there, and it's been a golf course. And my view from my front window is to look at that schoolyard and golf course. I don't want to see houses. That's why I moved there. That's why I bought my house there. what are you going to give back to those residents for those 5 to however many years you're going to be digging up there, and the noise, the dirt, the health problems you're going to create by doing it? My sons work from home. How is that going to be affected? What are you going to give back to those residents? Like, what is the benefit for us? All I see is you're destroying our neighborhood. We had a dead end street. We used to have the whole street would come out for barbecues and parties. That's not going to happen anymore. Like, everything changes for us. I know none of you guys live there, so I know, I get it. It's not going to affect you unless you golfed. My son's learned to golf up there with my dead husband. That's being taken away. Like, I don't know. It's crazy. But my other questions I can't think of. Am I still allowed to send letters or questions? Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yes, Ms. Harding, it comes before council at the end of the month, and yes, people can continue to submit written
Okay.
emails and submissions in respect to it.
Okay,
Okay,
thank you.
so we may have some questions for you.
Okay.
Let's see. So any questions for Ms. Harding? Well, Councillor Hunt Councillor Hunt, I think
Oh,
has a question for
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you for coming. You mentioned your backyard, so 191, I'm gonna say you're 5 houses down the street.
Yeah, I'm about halfway from, like, in front of
You're
the
looking at the
schoolyard.
back of the schoolyard.
But those
So
apartments are gonna be looking into my backyard.
that's your concern, is
I've
that-
already built a wall. I built a new deck, so I got them to put up a wall so that we can at least be on the upper deck and not be looked at. But my pool in the bottom part, like in my yard, and my bottom deck, you still can. You still will be able to see into.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much.
That's it.
Thank you very much, Ms. Harding. Is there any other member of the public who's present today that would like to speak to this matter, either in support of the application or in opposition to? At least, do we have anyone that's registered virtually? I think we have at least one or two. We have at least one. Well, why don't we, if you could just hold on for a minute, Kaylee, and we'll go to someone who would like to speak to us virtually.
Brent, if you can just accept the prompt on your screen.
Yes, Brent, we can see if you would just confirm your name and address, and then you'll have 10 minutes inclusive of any questions.
For sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My name is Brent Shred. I'm Executive Director of Lyons McGinnis House at 170 Henry Street here in Brantford. I just simply wanted to put on the record that we would be in favor of the developer and the city working together to create a pedestrian and bicycling access on the north end of this development through our property. Our property is roughly halfway across the top of the proposed development. We think there'd be a number of benefits from having a pedestrian access through there. For the residents who will live in this neighborhood, they'll have access to public transit on Henry Street, as well as the newly built bike corridor along Henry. So we think that's a benefit to them. And the benefit to us, the residents at Lyons McGinnis House are deafblind, individuals who have hearing and vision loss. They very much like to be in community, and to walking is one of their great pleasures. We are somewhat landlocked on our facility with being on a fairly busy residential street, that being Henry. We would very much like to have access to a quiet residential neighborhood, such as the one that's being proposed. And so we would like to have access to the parks and to the family-oriented residential neighborhood. And so we would like to have that public access come through our property. Would also give access to the residents who are in either side of us We have housing on both sides of our property, and if there was a pedestrian and bicycle corridor, then they could access those parks and that quiet neighborhood more easily as well. Thanks so much for your time.
Yeah, Mr. Shred, that property is at 170 Henry Street?
That's right.
Okay, so we'll see if there are any questions. Yes, Councilor Carpenter.
And for members of the committee, it's a site B, if you look on the page 46 of the application. So Brent, access, when you say access through the back of your property?
Yeah, the back of our property goes on to the former golf course, and it's roughly wooded. I mean, our property is grassed up into the end of our ownership. It wouldn't be too hard to put in a bicycle and pedestrian corridor between two residential houses and connect the two. And then we would come up with some sort of agreement with the city or the developer about providing a right of way through our property for bicycles and pedestrians.
So right away through your, that's what I was going to get to. So we would need a right of way through your property and through the development site as well.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there are things to be worked out. We're a not-for-profit organization. We have 2.3 acres. We don't have a lot of plans to develop the property at this point. So a right of way, I think, would be worked out, legally. I'm not too concerned, but obviously representatives from the city, from the developer, and from our board of directors would have to be involved to come up with an agreement that would be beneficial to everybody.
Who would maintain this access right away?
I guess I'm picturing the access similar to the ones that are on the proposal from the developer. So I don't know. I don't know who would provide maintenance and upkeep for that space.
And then an access, a right of way access would you are aware would not limit who could use it then? What members?
No, but no, I understand. But we're hoping that if it's bicycle and pedestrian only, that it would be folks in the neighborhood, and that will be fine for us. We do want to be, as a resident, want to be part of the community, and right now we feel a little cut off. So if there's a development happening behind us, we would like to have access to that property by walking through the back of our space, as opposed to out to Henry Street and then down Stanley, which are very busy streets for our residents. Busy streets are intimidating if you're unable to both see and hear. So if we could have access to this neighborhood, including the parks, through a pedestrian and bicycle path, it would be great.
And on that note, then would you be in support of as well as Stanley Street getting sidewalks on that side of Stanley that leads it to Henry for complete access around the property as well?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, our residents tend to get into vehicles and go with their interveners, which are their staff persons who give support to other residential neighborhoods or to the Wayne Gretzky facility to do walking, or to malls. It would be great if they could walk out their back door, walk down our property and into a residential neighborhood. But yeah, a sidewalk on Stanley would certainly be beneficial to us as well.
All the way to completed. Yes. Thanks, Brent. And I am aware what McGinnis House does. I was there for the original opening and I've been there for the anniversaries. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Brent. That was very informative. Lisa, do we have anybody else that has registered to submit virtually?
There are no other virtual registrations.
All right. Well, I'll come back to the chamber then. Is there anyone else present, a member of the public, that would like to speak to this matter, who hasn't already spoken? Okay, if you just state your full name and address, and then you'll have 10 minutes to make your presentation.
Can you hear me? Okay. My name is Kaylee Poisson. You guys have my address on record time and time again, as I've spoken to nearly every meeting that Airedale has come on to Chambers for. I did send an email to everyone on the committee as well as the clerk's department requesting a deferral of this application for amending the official plan as well as the bylaw for rezoning the property. I did specify my concerns with the level of public notification based on this. There's about 10 people in the council chambers right now speaking to this. We know for a fact that this is the most controversial decision and development this city has seen in decades. Decades. And we're holding this meeting at 9:30 on a Thursday, giving the community 2 weeks' notice to read over hundreds of pages, thousands of pages of documents, trying to understand what is happening, what their concerns are, what their questions are. And, you know, to try and navigate this in the best way possible. It's very clear that I'm strongly opposed to this decision. I have been for over 4 years. So has most of the city, most of the residents of Ward 4 and 5 have been very opposed to this decision. My initial question is, I'm looking to know if I have 10-minute limitation to speak on this. Okay. So I will just get right into it. I'm gonna leave out the personal details of how it will impact myself, and I will just do my best to try and squeeze in all of my questions and concerns that this will have as far as negatively impacting the community as a whole. My biggest concern again is the lack of public engagement. There's over 8,000 signatures that were signed years ago from the local community opposing this development. And through the mail-in proposal notifications, it was 120 meters from the property of people that were notified. I would like to understand exactly how many residents that was, and how it compares to the thousands of emails, comments, concerns, 3,500 members of a Facebook group that oppose this. How does that notification compare to what this council has seen in the last 4 years? Because in my opinion, it is severely lacking and it should be deferred to a proper time and notification where the community can have access for their concerns, and also given 10 minutes to fully understand the scope of this is inappropriate in my opinion as well. My other concern is the application documents and the testing and due diligence from Elite MD and their agents are biased. They're biased in favor of the development. Yes, they do outline some concerns, but they deem them to be insignificant a lot of the times, when if you actually look at the scope of the documents and what is outlined in there, the effects are significant. They're specifically significant to the residents directly across the street, to the residents of Ward 4, Ward 5, and beyond, with the environmental implications of developing the 4th largest green space in the city. And from my understanding, they are intending to utilize cash in lieu of their park space that is required. I believe they are required under the province for 32 acres of property at 5%, it's 1.6 acres of green space. And cash in lieu does not does not mean that they have to purchase green space somewhere else. They can give money into an account that can be used for a playground or golf carts for an existing space. That doesn't balance out the loss of green space. The significant loss of green space does not balance out. It's not appropriate, in my opinion, for them to be able to have cash in lieu of that as well. You know, it was mentioned earlier, cash in lieu of the loss of trees, not appropriate, in my opinion, either. We talk about the loss of trees, which is over 300 mature trees ranging from 50, 60, 100 years old. The genetic diversity of those trees is non-existent. You can't buy them in a store. You can't. And to offset 3 trees to 1, that's still not adequate for the carbon offset of those loss of trees. I can't get into it, obviously, because I have a time constraint. I have said time and time again, the environmental implications of this development on the city as a whole, today, tomorrow, 100 years from now, will be devastating to this city. Additional concerns and comments that I want to make is that I don't believe that this development is necessary. The housing targets from the province, the city of Brantford is exceeding their current goal. They're at about 176% of their goal. And that's nearly double of what the province is mandating. So if that's the case, why do we have to move forward with the development of this city and this development and the loss of green space? We need that green space if we're developing all of those other, areas. You need space for the animals, for the quality of life, for the residents that you're bringing here and the ones that already exist. My original speech on December 17th of 2019, I brought up the concern of the water usage and how significant that will increase versus a golf course. My numbers, again, significantly off because I was gauging about 300 residents. Now, based on the documents, with 65 units is 1,500 people. That is probably 100 times, maybe 150 times the water usage on that property than when it was a golf course. Significant increase. The shadow impact has already been discussed. I did read those documents as well. There were mentions of the city not wanting any impacts of that on the existing residents. Elite's documents outline 4 residents already that are going to be impacted by the current drawings and current plan. 4, including a resident that was already presenting. And that's not even including their proposed development, the shadow impacts of the development themselves, the new housing that they're planning on putting in there. Significant. It is going to affect those new residents that plan on purchasing those houses. It's the whole design of this development is inappropriate, in my opinion. It's one of those things where you're putting the cart before the horse, trying to push things through without proper, consultation, without proper research of the effects of what this is going to.
Kaylee, can you wrap it up in about 20 seconds?
I certainly can try. There is just an extreme level of inconsistencies in the documents that were submitted from Elite MD Developments versus, there's all sorts of changes in numbers. There's 764 units, there's 765 units, there's, a decrease in apartment units, but the stories haven't changed, the shadow impact, the traffic implications. I think that we should defer this meeting and this application until further information is provided. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Person. All right, is there any other member of the public who would like to come forward and speak to this application, either in support of or against the application? Sorry, ma'am, there's one opportunity only at a public hearing. All right. Is there anyone else is there any other member of the public who's present today that would like to speak to this matter, either in support of or against the application? I'll say it for a third and last time. If there's any other member of the public that's present today that would like to speak to this application, either in support of or in opposition to, now is your last chance to come forward. Not seeing anybody. Is there anything else we have virtually?
There are no other virtual registrants.
All right. All right, so I'll now call upon the applicant, your opportunity to come forward, sir. Mark? Number of questions raised. Hopefully you'll be responding to at least some of them.
Okay, I've got some detailed notes here on some of the comments and questions raised. But before I start into them, do I have a 5-minute limit on my response?
Yes, according to our rules of procedure, it's 5 minutes unless a member of the committee moves to extend it.
Okay, I'll focus in then on some of the larger questions, and if I have more time, then I'll get into some of the other ones. One of the largest concerns I'm hearing this morning is around Block 7 and that proposed 6-story mid-rise building as part of Area A. The question was, why are there not single detached? I was shown, or I was told it would be single detached, and this will greatly impact my property. So to the first question of why it's not single detached, I have never shown detached dwellings on that property or in that area. When I joined this project, which was in 2021, there has always been a 6-story mid-rise building proposed. So I can't speak to what may have been said or what may have been shown previously to the actual formal submission of the application in 2022. In terms of its design, and there's been some commentary around the shadows, we did submit a shadow study as part of this application, which was reviewed by staff and found acceptable. And part of the next phases of work will be to refine that when we do submit a formal application for the detailed design of that mid-rise building. We utilize the city's mid-rise guidelines and urban design standards to craft the shape of that building. We actually relocated it as part of the proposal when it came in from the way that the L is situated on that block. So we moved things around and terraced the building to meet a 45-degree angular plane adjacent to the low rises to the west. So we have used sound planning and urban design principles to conceptually design that block, and we will continue to do so when a formal application for a site plan does come in. And again, staff did mention that we would have a holding provision on the approved zoning bylaw to ensure that it's done correctly. There are quite a few technical comments here. I'll go through them very, very quickly here. Things like solar and geothermal drainage plans, snow storage and removal and maintenance. That all comes through the conditions of draft approval that are attached to this recommendation report. Staff have noted 101 and they're included in there. And as we get to the detailed design of the condo block and the mid-rise buildings, that's where the details of the snow storage on site will be delineated on those plans. In terms of parking, we are not seeking any reductions in parking anywhere on this plan. Every unit will have at least one parking space, either in a garage, two in a garage and within its driveway. The condominium block zone is not seeking a reduction in parking. It will meet the requirements of the bylaw. I don't recall if it's 1.5 or 1.25 spaces per unit. That is what it will provide. both for the apartment buildings as well as the condominium townhouses. And because we're not showing any at grade, doesn't mean it won't have any at grade when the formal application does come to the city for review. And we'll also be utilizing underground parking as part of those larger projects. So the intent is to have the required amount of parking through each phase of the development. There was a comment about acknowledging and recognizing or commemorating the former golf course. This was something that has come through previously through the city's Heritage Committee. There are recommendations which we have agreed to that will have us look to commemoration of some kind. And that again is within the conditions of approval and will be part of the approval process as we go through detailed design. I'm not quite sure how I'm doing on time here, but I'll keep going. You let me know when I've hit that mark. In terms of
Got a little over a minute unless it's extended.
Thank you. In terms of height for the mid-rise buildings, there was a comment around, we don't know what they are. We do, it's 6 and 8. The smaller block has a maximum height established in the draft bylaw is 6 stories. And the larger block as part of the part B of the proposal will be a maximum of 8. So there should be no confusion around what is proposed because staff have maxed out the height permitted per the draft bylaw. It was noted that the zone being sought for these two RHD permits up to, I believe, 12. But to ensure that what is proposed on the plan actually gets built, that cap and maximum has been established. Questions around First Nations. We did our consultations. This is noted in staff's reports. Reports and letters were submitted by the applicant advising of our consultation. We have records of this, so we have done our due diligence to ensure that that aspect of this review was completed.
Mark, we'll have to hold it there to see if there's going to be a motion to extend the time because we have hit 5 minutes. So moved by Councillor Carpenter. How long do you want to extend it for?
Until he finishes his submission. He doesn't have that much time.
Well, did you want to allow for any questions after that?
Yes, yeah, that's a good idea. I'll
Well,
give him
why don't we,
another-
my suggestion is why don't we extend it by 5 minutes and we can extend again?
See how it goes, sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I can get a seconder for that, Councillor Sless. If I can have a vote on that, please. Extending it 5 minutes.
Thank you. I don't have much more in terms of my response.
Hang on, we have to have our
Oh, sorry,
vote.
excuse me.
Yes.
The motion to waive the rules to extend the time carries on a record vote of 5-1. Those voting in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillor Coley, Sless, Carpenter, and Van Tilburg. Those opposed, Councillor McCurry.
Carry on, sir.
Thank you for the extra time. I wanted to clear something up in terms of affordable housing on these lands and for this project. It's my understanding that the city sold these lands for the purposes of development, residential development, not for the intention of having this specific project be affordable, but the funds attained from its sale to fund affordable development within the city. So there was never any intent by the applicant to have this project as affordable. But with that being said, the tenure and type of the mid-rise buildings has not been set, meaning when we get to the time of construction and site plan approval, my client, the applicant, can determine if they do want to include affordable housing or have them be rental. So I'm not suggesting that that's off the table. I'm stating that that was never the plan for the entire project. Questions around infrastructure and who's paying for that. That would be the applicant. This is their project. So all the new roads, all the sewer pipes, water mains, stormwater management facilities, that will be paid for, constructed, installed by the developer. Ultimately, those facilities, both the roads infrastructure will be dedicated to the city and assumed for their long-term ownership. But in terms of the installation, that will be done as part of the requirements for the builder. I wouldn't mind touching on, I think his name was Brent, in terms of this pedestrian access and for the Lyons McGuinness facility. Mike, he has reached out to my client and we are open to having a potential connection from his property through our phase 2, which would be the townhouse at the north end of the project. How that would work, we haven't gotten that far. This came up within the last week or so. So if we can figure out a way between ourselves, the city and Alliance McGuinness, we'll have to figure out a way to squeeze a block in for a pedestrian walkway. There are questions about maintenance and how would that work. There could be safety implications too. We have to evaluate that. There's no block on the plan for it. It was never our intention. So there's something new that's come up. And we're open to considering that connection as long as it works for all parties, because there will be, someone has to own it, someone has to maintain it and keep it safe. So, and we don't quite yet know who that is. Last question, around cash in lieu of, for the parkland. Yes, other than that new parkette in the northwest corner, there are no additional parks that are proposed. There is a privately owned public space, which I do think counts towards parkland dedications through the new changes to the Planning Act. But for the most part, we're not proposing to include a large park, primarily because there's a significantly large park right next door. I don't see a benefit in creating new open spaces when you have one next door that could be adequately used for residents in the community, including this development. And I'll end it here. There was a comment around why are we building or why are we proposing this development if we're meeting our minimum housing or growth targets per the growth plan. I can appreciate that comment. I hear that a lot. But first off, these are minimums. These are minimums set by the province to ensure that we accommodate growth. And can't confirm how Brantford's doing in terms of hitting their target. But again, these are minimums. And I think we all are familiar with the housing crisis that's within Ontario. So yes, we're hitting our minimum, but is that even enough? So I think what I'll do is end my comments there and make myself available for questions should there be any. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. You mentioned the walkway and that you had some concerns over maintenance and things like that. Is there any reason why the condo corporation couldn't retain ownership of that walkway, just like they are the park?
That is a good question. The nuance to that is the townhouses along the north end will be freehold. So they will not be owned by a condominium corporation. So there is a block along Stanley that is proposed that will be dedicated to the city for their long-term ownership and maintenance. It's shown, I think it was brown on one of my slides. We could do the same, but in this instance, it would have to be owned by a separate party because it will not be a condo corporation that will manage the north block of towns there.
Okay. I strongly suggest you look into that. And I think it would be a good idea and a good faith for the neighborhood if we created that.
Councillor Carpenter.
Thank you, Mark. That block access that Councillor Scully was talking about would then lead into Street A and would go through the subdivision to where to get to the park. I don't see an access to the park if it comes straight through, similar to the access on Stanley Street. So it looks like it would need to be an access point through the easement area. And I'm not sure how that would work. So when you're looking at that, you have to consider that. The question I have is the access to the park that you showed on the. Sorry, I got the floor. From the Elgin Street side, you showed a condominium having an access to the green space along the stormwater management pond. Is that what I saw when you showed it in the first time with the brown?
That's correct. On the earlier versions of the design, we had two pedestrian connections from internal of the development to the park. We were asked to consolidate those. And what we did was we moved that area into the storm pond because ultimately it would be owned and managed by the city. So through detailed design of the pond, we would be looking at a pedestrian connection from Street A through either next to or attached to the pond to the park.
So would it be?
All right, so we're gonna need another extension of 5 minutes. Moved by Councillor Carpenter, second by Councillor Sluss.
So with that access point, the 6-story apartment building.
Let's take the vote on that, make sure we're following the proper procedure.
Sure.
Won't cut into the 5 minutes, Councillor Carpenter.
Through the chair for clarification, that's an additional 5 minutes.
Yes, after the vote is taken.
Motion carries on a recorded vote of 5-1. Those councillors voting in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillor Sokoli, Sless, Carpenter, Van Tilburg. Those opposed, Councillor McCreary.
Carry on, Council Carpenter.
Thank you. Thanks, Mark. So with the access point that's on the apartment building side, who will maintain that? With the apartment building, if it becomes a condo, would that be written into their bylaws that they will maintain that access to the walkway? Or will the walkway be street A by the stormwater management, pond, not on the actual property where the story building is?
I'm having some trouble pinpointing exactly where you're referring to. Are you referring to the potential pedestrian connection from Street A through the swim pond to the park?
Yes. Is that at the very bottom then?
It's in between, it's above the pond, but below the first detached dwelling.
Oh, the single detached?
Yeah.
Okay, so it would be solely on city's property. And city would-
Correct.
City would be in charge of maintenance. Yes, I see them. Okay, that clarifies that. for me.
Okay.
One more question for you then, if I have. There are also requests that you do a financial analysis, an FIS. Could you give me in some detail what that would entail?
We did a report that was filed with the city as part of our application to understand the long-term cost of the infrastructure that would be proposed through this development. So that was filed and reviewed by city staff. And we will have to refine that when we get to detailed design as we get through the technical details of the storm pond design, the other infrastructure. We'll have to look at the costs, and staff will need to understand what the long-term maintenance will have to be for those facilities too.
And one more question, Mark, if I may. The Maitland Street, Campbell Street part where the 6-story apartment building is going, you will access any construction from that from the Elgin Street site, not from the Campbell Street quiet street?
If I understand the question, you're seeking or asking if we can confirm that construction would occur from the Maitland extension versus Campbell?
Yes.
I think we can accommodate that. We're not quite at the construction management plan portion, that's detailed design. But again, I'm not a builder here, but I presume that could happen, yes.
You know, it would, to avoid having heavy dump trucks
Exactly.
going down in a small street. Okay,
Exactly.
thank you, thank you.
Councillor Sless.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Would your client entertain removing the 6-story building and putting in single family?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we've looked at that. I was in this room last summer and had a similar question in terms of, could you just put down singles? We did explore that. I'll be honest, we did explore that in quite amount of detail. But given the corridor, the need for housing and the appropriate location of mid-rise buildings along Elgin, we thought it'd be more appropriate to put it there than, let's say, up Stanley. So we have looked at it. It's been evaluated, and it's our opinion, my opinion, that it's best suited where it is.
Okay. You wouldn't entertain a second review of that, eh?
I can ask my client, but I think given all the efforts we've gone through to look at this, I think what is proposed is appropriate, but I can ask the question, but I think what we've got is what we'll likely move forward with.
Okay.
Thank you.
Street naming.
Yes.
Can you give consideration? I think there was a request, and actually it ties into my last question too, which is your parquet. As far as commemorating and honoring the property itself and the heritage of it, I would believe that there's opportunity to put amenities in that parquet that would reflect that, whether it's pictorial, whatever it would be, but there would be opportunity in there, I would think, to commemorate the property on which it stands. And I would think the same thing with the street naming. I think it would be appropriate to come with.
Do you have a question?
Or do you think it would be appropriate to come with golf terminology and the name itself as far as street naming internally?
To you, Mr. Chair, I would agree. We haven't gotten to the point of naming streets or parquets, but I wrote it down. I think it was Arrowdale Road or Lane of some kind. But I think it's a great idea. We can work with staff to figure out the names of the streets and the parquet. The programming of the parquet, I would have to leave to city staff. Once you dedicate the land, it's up to the city to figure out the programming of it. But we can certainly work with them to figure out what that could look like. But I'm in favor of the naming proposed.
Okay, I wasn't particularly referring to programming. I was looking at perhaps pedestals with pictorial things on it, commemorating the history of the property on which it sits.
That is required with our conditions of approval, so we will have to do that, yes.
But you want to, correct?
We want to as well.
Thank you.
One more question, Councillor Hunt.
For you, I can only get one.
Unless somebody extends the time.
Okay, so Martin, thank you for coming. One of the conditions, is that the entire property be fenced along the west, border. I guess I'm asking if that fencing would go up prior to the start of any phase of construction.
This would be along the rear of the storm pond as well as the detached units.
I believe the condition that I read was that the west border of the property be fenced, so that would run all the way from Elgin Street to the parkette in the northwest corner.
There certainly would be long-term fencing behind those units for privacy and amenity space. Long-term fencing along the pond, I'm not quite sure of. That's an element of detail design that the city would have to weigh in on. But I think we can look at fencing along that side during construction. Can I ask what the concern might be? Is it just debris and stuff going over back and forth?
I think we're looking at ways during the construction that we can mitigate dust, pests, the migration of that from what's basically going to be a construction site in the middle of a residential area. And because the fencing condition is there, the question would be, can we put the fence up before you start construction?
I think we could. We'll have to work through those pre-construction details with the city and staff as conditions of our approval. And if that's a request by the city, we can certainly look at that. So I think we can have that on our list.
Okay, do I have 30
That's as
seconds?
far as we can go. We've gone significantly beyond the 5 enlisters resolution again to extend for further time. Seeing no resolution. Thank you very much, Mark.
Thank you.
All right, so that concludes the public meeting portion of this particular agenda item. We'll now move into debate and discussion, but because it's very close to noon, we're going to take a lunch break and we'll be reconvening at 11:35. 12:35.